Good evening, young people. I am going to be talking today about writing an informal lab report, especially using Google Slides to write the beginning pieces of your lab report. So let's talk about that and what that entails and what that looks like. So first of all, required slides for your lab report are going to be a title slide, an abstract slide, introduction slides that has purpose and hypothesis on it, procedure slides, data slides, analysis slides, conclusion slides, and reference slides. And anytime it has slides, that means that you should be using probably more than one slide to do the job because one slide may not be quite enough. Okay, and you can see over there that the required format for anything that you write is you want to be creative, but you also want to use paragraph form. When necessary, we're using APA format. You're using third person narrative. That means we're not talking about people. We're not mentioning I, me, we, you, he, they, the group, none of that. We're talking about the science, and that is an uncomfortable thing to do, but you get used to it after you've done it for a while. We need to have error-free grammar, spelling, and punctuation. And we need to make the science shine. And sources must be included because the introduction piece that you're going to be working through requires research, and research means that you're going to have sources. So the three things that we're going to be looking at most today are the title slide, the introduction slides, and the reference slide or slides, depending on how many references you have. So the title slide, first of all, you already know this information. The title must contain an IV and a DV and the relationship you're seeking between them. The title must be informative and tell the reader what the experiment is about before they read the entire report so that they kind of know what the report is going to be about. And the title may not be a question. Because you're doing a title page or a title slide, you're going to include some more information that you're going to see on the next slide, which is an example of what a title slide would look like. So, determining the percentage by mass of acetylsalicylic acid in various brands of aspirin containing over-the-counter medications. So the aspirin containing over-the-counter medications using a reaction with sodium hydroxide. So basically, I'm going to look at 4 or 5 different brands of things that say they contain aspirin. I'm going to do a reaction with sodium hydroxide to determine how much acetylsalicylic acid is there. Yes, that's a little difficult to say. Sydney F. Rains is the person who is writing this. She is a student at Pleasant Ridge Park High School in advanced chemistry class with Mrs. April Rains, and she is doing this on October 2022, October 12th, 2022. So you can see you have to have your title, you have to have your name, school, class, teacher, and then the date that it's due. So that's the title slide. Title slides are pretty simple. You already know how to do a title, but you need to make sure that you have all of the information here. All right, introduction slash purpose slash hypothesis slide. So the introduction is written in a way that you're going to have all of these things in that. It must be in paragraph form. It requires research from credible and reliable sources. It tells what is known about the main concept or idea before the research, and it starts off broad and then gets more specific as we go down. It must tell about the background of the experiment. So it must tell why we're doing the experiment. It must tell me more about what I need to understand what I'm getting ready to read about in the experiment. Okay, it must be in sentence form. You have to tell the overall purpose of the experiment that you're talking about. So you have to hint at what you're learning in the lab. What are the things you're learning? It must include a properly formatted hypothesis of if-then statement that tells all about the IV choice and the DV outcome that you expect from that choice. The science must shine, not the people. So I don't want to know anything about any people who did anything. I want to know about the science. Unless you're talking about somebody who discovered something, and you mention the name specifically because they were the discoverer of something, I don't want to hear about, I did this, we did this, they did this, unless it's somebody specific and you're giving it as a source of information to help me understand. Sources are needed here, and it must be in APA format, and you must have in-text citations within your introduction. You may need more than one slide to complete this. In fact, I used 3 slides to complete the example that I'm going to show you. So here's the example. So I'm going to write introduction, and I'm not going to put example, I'm just going to write introduction, and then introduction continued on the other slides. So you can see my introduction starts off talking about salicylic acid has been used in many ancient civilizations using the bark of trees like willow, myrtle, meadow, and meadowsweet since 2500 BCE. And you can see the in-text citation right there, Aspirin Foundation 2020. Okay, and I'm not going to read all of this to you, but you can see I next start talking about the Druids and what the Druids were thinking about and what it was first used for in the early 1800s and what happened there with all of that. And you can see I have several different in-text citations here. So you see the next page says introduction example continued, and it keeps talking about what was happening in the discovery of acetylsalicylic acid. So the scientists found out that the active ingredient used to help reduce fevers was salicylic acid, but it had a lot of side effects. And it could damage your mouth, your esophagus, mucous membranes. It could cause you to throw up, all this stuff. So you can see that that was researched and something was found there. And then we know that in 1899, the Bayer Company comes up with this new ester of salicylic acid, commonly known as aspirin. And they are the first ones to patent and call the stuff aspirin. So many different companies have used the chemical since then in their medications and products. And we see that the purpose of the laboratory is to investigate the percentage of aspirin in different brands of pain medications. And it says, for hypothesis, I believe that if Bayer aspirin is tested against other brands, then Bayer will have the highest percent of acetylsalicylic acid. So there's my hypothesis. So you see very clearly that I did some research. I talk about what I need to talk about, what I need to know, what I need to understand, and then I get to the idea of what's happening and what I'm going to try to find out. I'm not talking about the procedure. I'm not talking about the results. None of that is here. This is simply research about what we need to know to understand where we're going to and why we're doing it. Okay? Lastly, reference slides or the bibliography, I call that too. It has to be in APA format, but you can use Scribbr.com for this. And I've shown you that on your resource notes. So if you're watching this video, you've already looked at resource notes and you've already seen some things that you can do with it. Okay, you must have the first line that is not indented, and then any line after the first line of a source is indented. Just like you would in a paragraph where the first line is indented, but the others are not, it's opposite. The first line is not, but the others are. So a little different. It must be in alphabetic order. It represents all the sources that were used in the report, including the introduction and conclusion portions. Now, we don't always use research and conclusions, but sometimes it is. So anytime you use any resource, any reference in any part of your lab, you need to make sure that you're putting it in this. So an example of a bibliography page using the introduction that I looked at today, here is my introduction, and you will notice I don't have them numbered, but I do have them listed in alphabetic order, and you can see that they're in alphabetic order here. And you can see that the first part of each of them, that's how you know where they are. You can see the first part of each of them right here, aspirin foundations, right? And then you can see the second line is indented. And then you see aspirin, turn of the century miracle drug. And then you see the second and third line are indented. And then you say history of aspirin, and you can see that the second and third line are indented again. And then finally salicylic acid, and you can see that the second line is indented. This is what it should look like in APA format. And Scribbr can do almost all this for you, except for get the formatting right. So please make sure, if you don't know how, to make sure it gets formatted so that the first line is not indented and the second and third and whatever lines that follow are. Please make sure that you ask how to do that. So this is kind of what you're expected to have at the end of your introduction piece. These are the 3 things that I'm expecting to see from you when you turn in your introduction as your formative assessment for the choice lab that you did.